Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We're taking a fascinatingly strange plunge today.
Definitely strange.
We're looking closely at a set of dark web Reddit stories a listener sent our way. I bought a DNA test. I found the truth on the dark web about Ground Zero. And I got an invite to the dark web's VIP club.
Quite the titles.
Right. And alongside these unsettling tales, we've also got some interesting material on how we analyze stories, especially when, artificial intelligence might be involved.
Yeah, that angle is really interesting.
So our mission today is to really dig into these narratives, spot the moments that maybe don't quite add up, consider how believable they are, even within their own sort of dark web logic, and explore if the quirks we find might point to something like maybe AI trying its hand at storytelling.
It's a relevant question these days.
Absolutely. For you, our listener, our curious learner, we're aiming to connect the dots in a way that's insightful, hopefully, without feeling like a lecture. Okay, let's unpack this.
So what's immediately striking, I think, is how these three Reddit stories, when you look at them together, they create this certain expectation of, dark web weirdness.
Yeah, totally.
But the way they actually deliver on that expectation often feels a little off.
Off, exactly. There's this almost familiar structure to them, like they're hitting the notes of a thriller, maybe. But something just doesn't quite resonate as, genuinely unsettling. And it brings to mind a point made in the Snarky AI video we looked at.
Yes.
About how AI can sometimes mimic the form of human writing without fully grasping the underlying intent or creating a truly convincing narrative tone.
That's such a crucial point.
Yeah.
AI might be excellent at, say, identifying and replicating common plot devices or dramatic beats it finds in tons of dark web stories.
Right, the patterns.
Exactly. But it could struggle with the more subtle aspects of building a cohesive and believable world, even a dark web one, that internal logic piece.
So as we were reading through these, where did those moments of things feeling off really jump out? Let's maybe start with, I bought a DNA test.
Okay.
For me, right away, the website vanishing.
Yeah.
Instantly.
Yeah.
After one use.
Yeah.
That felt less like shadowy dark web activity and more like a plot contrivance. Just too neat.
You're right. I mean, while the dark web is known for being ephemeral, websites popping up and down.
Sure.
A complete disappearance immediately after a single transaction like that. It feels like it prioritizes maybe convenience for the story over a sense of inherent dark web risk and consequence.
Yeah.
A human author might introduce more ambiguity or, lingering traces, something to add to the unease rather than just poof, it's gone.
And then the sudden phone going haywire, the battery drain, apps closing. It's presented as this really ominous event. But the story doesn't really connect it to anything substantial within its own rules, does it? It just feels like a generic scare tactic. Something bad is happening.
Precisely. An AI trained on a massive data set of thrillers might recognize, okay, sudden tech malfunctions often signal danger.
Right.
But it may not fully grasp the need to integrate that event logically into the specific thread of this narrative. Why the phone? Why now?
And the almost immediate arrival of the Men in Black, that also felt incredibly improbable.
Oh, yeah.
How could they possibly pinpoint the narrator's location so quickly after just one dark web purchase? Even with advanced surveillance, that kind of rapid response feels more like, a movie trope than anything grounded.
That's a prime example, I think, of the narrative just sacrificing believability for heightened tension.
Yeah.
A human writer might have laid some groundwork, maybe hinted at how the narrator was being tracked, or perhaps the site itself was a trap.
Something.
Right. Here, it just feels abrupt, almost as if the plot simply demanded their immediate appearance right then.
And the friend. The friend in the three-letter government department spilling sensitive information so easily. That raised a lot of red flags for me, plausibility-wise.
Absolutely. I mean, what are the realistic risks and protocols involved in a scenario like that?
Exactly.
The story just breezes past all these complexities, opting for a quick way to deliver exposition. And that can feel less like genuine storytelling and more like efficient plot maneuvering.
Yeah.
Maybe too efficient?
Yeah, like checking a box. And finally, in that first story, the narrator's supposed transformation in isolation. Without basic needs. It felt incredibly rushed and, frankly, lacked any real depth.
The story tells us the narrator changed, but, going back to the Snarky AI video, conveying genuine internal transformation, the why and how of that shift that requires a level of nuanced understanding of human psychology that AI might struggle to replicate convincingly, especially in such a short time frame. And under those conditions, it felt very surface level.
Okay, let's move on to I found the truth on the dark web about Ground Zero.
Okay. This one.
The core idea itself, this secret, thriving ecosystem called Ground Zero. It felt more like a fantastical concept than something rooted in even the wildest dark web conspiracy theories I've heard.
Agreed. While the dark web certainly hosts some elaborate theories,
Oh, definitely.
the scale and secrecy implied by a fully functioning replacement ecosystem operating for decades, that requires a significant leap of faith from the reader. The story just presents the idea but doesn't offer much in the way of internal consistency to make it feel even remotely plausible within that context.
And the delivery method for some info, the pre-recorded message on a landline phone, that struck me as odd in a narrative supposedly steeped in cutting-edge digital subterfuge.
It does feel like a familiar trope of mystery, doesn't it? The ominous phone call.
Yeah.
But deployed here without really considering the logic of the story's world, why this outdated method of communication in a digitally focused conspiracy, it feels mismatched.
And the document about Leanna G., the stillbirth who's supposedly alive in Ground Zero, it's a shocking revelation, sure, but the story doesn't really explore how such a massive deception could possibly be maintained for so long.
Exactly. A human writer might delve into the logistics, the potential whistleblowers, the sheer difficulty of keeping something like that secret. Here, it's just presented as a plot point, kind of dropped in, without the necessary foundation to make it truly resonate or feel, well, real within the story.
Then there's the random text message with a link to Shanghai transit footage.
Right.
Who sent it, and why this specific footage at that exact moment, it felt very, very convenient for moving the plot forward. Like, okay, now we need the narrator to see this.
It's another instance where information is delivered in an almost decimalist ex machina fashion.
Yeah.
There's no clear motivation established for this sudden information dump, which can really undermine the sense of organic narrative development.
Yeah.
It feels forced.
The encounter with Julian, too, and his talk of channelers and soul erasure, that felt particularly far-fetched, even for a dark web story.
Mm-hmm.
And the missing pinky and the name recall thing just added to the bizarre feeling of it all.
These fantastical elements feel somewhat disconnected from the established, albeit strange, reality of the dark web premise they started with. While they're unsettling, maybe, they lack a clear integration into the narrative's logic. It makes them feel more like random weirdness thrown in rather than integral parts of the story's world.
And the rotary phone reappearing after being thrown away.
Oh, that bit.
That felt almost cartoonish to me, lacking any sense of grounded dread. It just happened.
It's a classic horror trope, definitely, the object that won't stay
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
But in this context, without any supernatural elements being clearly established beforehand, it comes across as more of a narrative shortcut than a genuinely chilling event. It didn't quite land.
Finally, in the Ground Zero story, the concept of the proxy anchor and Julian's fate, it felt a bit arbitrary, like a convenient way to tie up a loose end without much justification.
The connection between the narrator's actions and Julian's demise feels weak, doesn't it? The proxy anchor seems like a plot device introduced pretty late, just to resolve one issue, maybe while creating another, rather than feeling like a logical consequence flowing from the story's own internal rules.
Okay, let's turn our attention to the third one. I got an invite to the dark web's VIP club.
The VIP club, right?
The physical metal card arriving after a DM. The interesting mix of digital and physical, I thought. But why that particular combination? Does it serve a purpose?
Perhaps it's an attempt to add a layer of tangible exclusivity to a digital invitation, make it feel more real or special.
Maybe.
However, as the Snarky AI might point out, the seemingly arbitrary detail might lack a deeper narrative purpose or thematic resonance that a human author would typically consider. Why metal? Why delivered physically? Does it connect to anything else? The story doesn't really say.
And the immediate disappearance of the user at the table is ready again.
Yeah, gone.
It felt abrupt. And again, more designed just to create mystery than to logically progress the story. Where did they go? Why?
It certainly adds to the club's mystique, for sure. But without any explanation or foreshadowing, it can feel like a purely superficial way to generate unease. It's spooky, but hollow, maybe.
What about the strict rules at the VIP club? Did you notice any inconsistencies in how they were enforced or how the guests behaved?
Yes, actually. While the rules are presented as absolute, like don't look too closely, the narrator seems to observe quite specific details, like the head after the first course, apparently without any consequence.
Right. I noticed that too.
That inconsistency weakens the sense of a strictly controlled, dangerous environment. If the rules can be bent for the narrator, how serious are they?
And the selection process, the vanishing guests, it all felt very arbitrary. What criteria were being used? Why were these disappearances happening?
The story offers no real insight into that selection process at all. The disappearances serve to create a sense of danger, obviously.
Yeah.
But the lack of explanation makes the threat feel abstract and maybe less impactful than it could be. Who gets chosen? Why? We don't know.
The tooth in a silver box as payment.
Yeah.
That's certainly a bizarre, visceral image. What did you make of that?
It's definitely unsettling, isn't it? It hints at a deeply personal and perhaps even sinister transaction. Something intimate is being exchanged. Right. However, the story leaves the specific meaning and significance of this payment largely unexplored. It's a striking image, but what does it mean in this context?
The shifting voice in the narrator's ear, that added to the surreal atmosphere, sure, but who or what was communicating, and why the changes in the voice?
The shifting voice definitely contributes to the unsettling tone, creates disorientation, but the lack of clarity about its origin or purpose makes it feel more like a generic spooky element, maybe, than a meaningful part of the narrative with clear implications.
In the final tray with coordinates, and the other guest's reaction of sheer terror.
Yeah, that was intense.
It certainly suggests something beyond just a weird dinner party. What did you take away from that ending sequence?
Well, the coordinates hint at a continuation or an escalation of whatever's going on, right? Something happens after the dinner.
Right. And the other guest's terror suggests the consequences are dire. But the story doesn't really explore what these implications might be. It leaves you hanging, but maybe without enough clues. The reappearance of the childhood dentist photo felt particularly jarring to me.
Oh, yeah, that was specific.
How could this club possibly have obtained such a specific personal item? Where does that come from?
That moment highlights a level of intrusive knowledge that's deeply unsettling, for sure. It implies they know everything.
Yeah.
But the story provides absolutely no explanation for how this information was acquired, so it feels more like a shock tactic designed to freak out the reader and narrator than a logical plot development stemming from anything established earlier.
And the narrator's sudden, specific hunger after leaving the club, how did that tie into the events they experienced?
It seems to be some kind of lingering effect of the club, doesn't it? Perhaps connected to the unsettling payment, the tooth, or just the overall deeply weird experience. No. But the nature and implications of this hunger remain vague. Is it literal, symbolic? We're not really guided.
The satellite imagery revealing a temporary structure that then vanishes. What could that signify about the nature of this VIP club?
Well, the ephemeral nature of the structure could reflect the transient and hidden nature of the club itself, right?
Yeah.
Existing briefly in a specific place and then disappearing without a trace.
Like a phantom.
Exactly. It reinforces the idea that this isn't a permanent fixture, but something elusive and perhaps not entirely bound by normal rules.
And the final text message. Do not eat meat. Return is approaching. Who do you think sent that? Yeah. And what's this return?
Well, the sender is unknown, which adds to the mystery. And the return is left completely ambiguous. It adds a final layer of unresolved mystery and potential ongoing threat. What return? Whose return? It's ominous but undefined.
Then there's the bit with Jordan finding the TTMS contact list with the expired entries next to missing programmers. How do you see that connecting back to the narrator's experience?
That discovery introduces a disturbing potential real-world consequence to the fantastical events at the club.
Right, it grounds it a little.
It suggests a link between this weird VIP club and the actual disappearances of these programmers, implying that individuals might be considered, well, disposable or expired within this shadowy organization. It makes the threat feel more concrete, suddenly.
Okay, so looking at all these inconsistencies and moments that don't quite ring true across all three stories, it really makes you think about how they were constructed, doesn't it?
It really does.
And bringing it back to the Snarky AI piece, the video talks about AI's potential difficulties with maintaining consistent intent and narrative tone. Do you see evidence of that in these dark web tales?
Absolutely. I mean, the plot holes we've just spent time identifying could very well stem from an AI struggle to build a truly cohesive and logically consistent narrative world.
Yeah.
It might be good at generating intriguing scenarios and unsettling details based on patterns it's learned.
Like the tooth or the vanishing website.
Exactly. But it might lack the underlying sort of common sense understanding needed to connect them all seamlessly and logically.
It's almost as if the AI can create the impression of a dark web story hitting certain keywords and tropes, but it falters when it comes to the nuanced cause and effect, the why behind things that a human author would typically focus on.
Exactly. You put it well. An AI might be trained on a huge data set of dark web narratives and be able to reproduce those surface-level elements convincingly enough, but ensuring that those elements fit together logically, contribute to a believable internal world, and serve a clear narrative purpose, that's a much more complex task that likely requires human-like understanding and intent.
And as the Snarky AI also pointed out, even with AI-generated content, significant human editing is usually needed to achieve coherence and style.
Crucial point.
Could a lack of thorough editing be contributing to the issues we're seeing in these Reddit stories? Maybe they were generated and just posted.
That's highly probable, I'd say. A human editor could spot these inconsistencies, smooth out the logical flow, perhaps ask why about certain elements, and refine the narrative to create a more convincing, immersive experience.
Yeah.
If these stories haven't undergone that kind of rigorous editing, then the underlying limitations of whatever generated them, be it difficulty with consistent world building or nuanced character motivation, would be much more apparent. The seams would show.
So even allowing for the heightened reality of dark web fiction, you expect things to be weird.
Right. You suspend disbelief to a point.
But the internal logic of these stories often feels shaky. The believability within their own established or unestablished rules frequently falters.
Precisely. Even in fantastical genres, there generally needs to be some sense of consistent internal rules for the reader to grab onto. In these stories, the rules often seem to bend or break just as needed to advance the plot, rather than the plot unfolding organically within a defined framework. And that can lead to a feeling of arbitrariness, which pulls you out of the story.
Okay, so to summarize our deep dive here, we've encountered, numerous plot holes and moments that strain believability across these 3 dark web Reddit stories.
Quite a few, yeah.
And as we've discussed, these inconsistencies, along with the occasional reliance on convenient tropes and maybe a lack of deep internal logic, could potentially point towards limitations in AI's ability to craft truly cohesive narratives. And that aligns with some of the points made in the Snarky AI video.
Exactly. While the initial premises of these stories might be intriguing, they grab your attention.
They do.
Their execution often falls short because of these internal inconsistencies. There's a sense that the plot is being driven by convenient contrivances rather than organic development. And this raises really interesting questions, I think, about the future of online storytelling.
Yeah.
And specifically, how we might discern between human-authored and potentially AI-generated content down the line.
That gives us a final provocative thought for you, the listener. As AI writing continues to evolve, and it is evolving rapidly, potentially becoming much more sophisticated, how we, as readers and listeners, learn to identify the subtle signs, the cracks in the internal logic, the reliance on convenient tropes, the slightly off tone that might distinguish genuinely human storytelling from narratives crafted by artificial intelligence, especially in the often murky and anonymous corners of the internet, like Reddit or forums supposedly relaying real experiences.
What will that mean for our trust in the stories we encounter online? It's a big question.
It really is. We encourage you to revisit these stories if you like, think about what stood out to you, and consider your own criteria for believability. Thanks for diving deep with us.